Our project was the point-of-care newborn heart imaging project.
A significant number of babies in the U.S., tens of thousands actually, that are born with congenital heart disease. It is the most prevalent birth defect and a major killer of babies, actually. And we have a huge issue with prenatal diagnosis still in this country. Less than 50% in rural and outlying areas. That number actually falls closer to 25%. I live in Minnesota, so we have a huge state. Texas, same thing, lots of outlying areas where that prenatal detection rate is very low, a little bit higher in metropolitan areas. But the point is, 20,000 of these babies in the U.S. are coming out of the womb with congenital heart disease that is undiagnosed. And a third of those babies run the risk of delayed or misdiagnosis after the newborn nursery.
So interestingly enough, our family fell into sort of all three of these categories. Our baby Eve, up at the top, was 1 in 100, so she was one of those 40,000 babies. She was not diagnosed prenatally. She was diagnosed at 3 days of age, really as our bags were packed and ready to leave the hospital. And so technically, we would have been a missed diagnosis. We just had the stars align, and we got incredibly lucky. So this is about the size of a newborn heart. Our daughter's heart was 3 times this size. And they did her echo at 3 days old. She was in heart failure, completely asymptomatic, other than a mild murmur. So where we're trying to go here is to improve outcomes through early detection of congenital heart disease. We've got a domestic use case for this, and that is that in 2009 we started a pilot in Minnesota using pulse oximetry to screen newborns to help earlier detect hypoxemia. And that led to sort of a process that I pursued at the federal level to get critical congenital heart disease nominated as a condition for the routine uniform screening panel. So all the blood spot screenings that they do for babies, it's called the RUSP. The only other thing that they screen for that's not a blood spot screening for newborns is hearing screening. So it was a little bit novel. It's the first time we'd screened for a birth defect. But the good news is in 2010, that committee did actually vote to recommend all newborns in the United States be screened for heart disease. So that's 4.1 million babies that are now going to have a pulse oximetry screening, and hopefully will up our chances of knowing that there's something else we need to do diagnostically to confirm whatever that cause of hypoxemia is. This is where a simple, rapid, scalable imaging technology comes into play. The issue is this sort of technology is simply not available. We have babies being born at 6,000 hospitals and birthing centers across the country. Only 3%, 3.5% at best, have specialty pediatric cardiac care, meaning they have pediatric cardiologists, echo techs, cardiac surgeons. So that's a huge disparity, and these kids are just universally being transported regardless of what we know about their condition. So what we're trying to do is have a tool with caregivers with limited skills in those low-resource community hospitals and rural and underserved settings that they can use to determine what sort of status the baby's heart might be in if they have symptoms or if they failed their screening. So this is where we sort of started, was a diagnostic pathway for these kids, utilizing kind of standard echo probes made for neonates, something that would plug and play with off-the-shelf tablets, trying to get us away from the big sort of $300,000 echo carts that are available in most hospitals, but not all, and then ported imaging software. This really evolved through the process, and that was with the team kind of and our co-team members out in the audience throwing a lot of ideas at us, which was great. So we actually have a directive out of that Secretary Sebelius recommendation to develop this technology. It simply doesn't exist for these failed screens. Like, what are you going to do with them in outlying areas? So we furthered the idea by trying to eliminate the handheld probe. That gets rid of the idea of, like, this is a technician doing Eve. She knows what she's doing. She's been an echo tech for 15 years. She knows exactly how to place that probe, exactly how to acquire images on a tiny heart, and exactly how to acquire images on a heart that has a congenital anomaly, which, of course, adult technicians are not used to seeing. So we've got standardized echo transducers in our technology that can be scalable and improve. We could start out pretty rudimentary and improve that as we go along, and then blend with existing capabilities. existing hardware for those places that do have that $300,000 Echo Cart, but a standalone data acquisition tool for the places that don't, so it can store and transmit as needed. So here's what we came up with. We called it the whoosh because that's what it sounds like. If you've ever heard an echo, either a baby ultrasound or a heart echo, it's that whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So it hyper simplifies the data acquisition, and what we sort of needed was a baby to test model this on. So this is Maybelline. She's my fourth. Easiest delivery. Yeah. And she's about the same heft as an actual newborn. This is about what E was at, about 6 pounds. And this is actually my cosmetic bag, so that's why she's called Maybelline. It's full of all my makeup, so I should borrow someone else's lipstick. And that's my sign that we need to be almost done. But what we're going to be doing with her is when she comes in, she's at a hospital 100 miles from Houston. She's failed her pulse ox screening. She's going to come in to the primary care doctor, who's been called in by the nurse, and they're going to be able to put this almost band-like transducer switch. It's adhesive, so it's not going to move around when we put it on the baby, so much like an EKG patch. But it's going to be able to get everything that's sort of required to make a rudimentary decision about what sort of status the baby's heart is in. Simple, three-pronged, red, yellow, green, and hopefully that's going to get us to the next step, which I'm going to let James really quickly talk about.
So we have 3 different scenarios that we're envisioning when the baby's out of the hospitals. Baby's been at home for 3 days. Baby turns blue. Mom and dad freak out. Babies aren't supposed to be blue. We get them in the car. We rush to ER. ER, triage, nurse takes a look. Takes the device. Whoosh. The information is sent to the monitor nearby by Bluetooth, and we call in a cardiologist. Second scenario. We're 200 miles from the nearest sick kids hospital. We're on the highway. We call 911 because the baby's blue. What happens? They send out a paramedic. Paramedic rig shows up. The paramedic takes the device, puts on the baby, whoosh. We find out we've got a red coat. They call in to the nearest sick kids hospital. They fly in an air ambulance. We get the baby to hospital right away. Third case, 1 weekend, we go to the GP for the regular checkup. We know what those checkups are like. The GP, not a cardiologist, not a specialist, but has a suspicion that something's wrong. Takes the device, puts it on, whoosh, red. Calls up the sick kids hospital down the street. They send a paramedic, bring the kid to the hospital.
Great. I've officially decided James should have done this whole presentation. So here we are, next steps. We need to do some clinical field research. I've done about 2.5 years of research with the clinical teams and engineering specialists on developing what was our original thought process. So we've got some great data, but we need to figure out whether this simple layover transducer patch would work, and what type of materials, et cetera. Early stage test pilots would be awesome. We're looking at the need for partner funding to be able to advance any and all of that. And our goal would be to implement as soon as possible in underserved communities with our domestic use case, and in certain mid-tier developing countries that would be ready for this sort of thing. Thanks so much for your time.